It seems you've made yourself quite at home. But first, I think the help should go to the kitchen and make us some tea. You're choosing the help over your own wife, over your family.
A true family wasn't about biology or a marriage certificate. It was about love, stability, and being there for each other day after day.
African Karma Stories.
Poor Maid who sleeps outside at night met a billionaire that took her in as a wife. She sleeps on cardboard outside a closed shop until the man she once helped in secret steps out of a black SUV and changes everything. The morning sun pushed through a gap in the curtains, painting a bright stripe across Ethan's face. He blinked, his eyes feeling heavy and gritty. A quick glance at the clock on his bedside table made his heart jump. It was already 7 o'clock. He was late again. "Maya!" he called out, his voice rough with sleep. He threw off the covers and rushed out of his room. The living room in his Skyview apartment was a mess. Plates from last night's dinner sat on the coffee table. A stack of his work papers had spilled onto the floor. He promised himself every night that he would clean up, but by the time he got home from his job as an architect, he was too tired to do anything but fall onto the sofa. He pushed open the door to his daughter's room. Maya, who was only 8, was already dressed, but she was sitting on the edge of her bed with a sad look on her face. She was not wearing her school uniform. "Good morning, my dear," Ethan said, trying to sound cheerful. "Why aren't you in your uniform?" Maya looked down at her feet. "It's dirty, Daddy." "All of them are." Ethan's chest felt tight. He had forgotten to do the laundry for the 3rd time this week. He ran a hand over his bald head, feeling a wave of guilt wash over him. Ever since his wife Clara had left a year ago, it felt like he was always forgetting something. He was trying his best, but his best never seemed to be enough. He was a good architect. He designed beautiful buildings that stood tall all over Metro City, but at home he couldn't even manage to keep his daughter's clothes clean. "I'm so sorry, Maya," he said softly. He went to her closet and pulled out a simple dress. "Wear this for today. I promise I will wash your uniforms as soon as I get home tonight." Maya didn't say anything. She just took the dress and slowly began to change. Ethan went to the kitchen to try and make breakfast. He opened the fridge and saw only a carton of eggs and a small piece of yam. He had forgotten to go to the market, too. He managed to fry an egg, but it came out a little burnt around the edges. He put it on a plate with a slice of bread and carried it to the dining table. Maya came out of her room, her school bag slung over her shoulder. She looked small and unhappy in her regular clothes. "Eat quickly, my love. We are very late," Ethan said, trying not to let his own stress show. Maya picked at her food. "Daddy," she said in a small voice, "I have a big test today in mathematics." Ethan closed his eyes. Of course, the one day she needed everything to be perfect was the day he messed everything up. He felt a terrible weight settle in his stomach. He was failing her. He was failing as a father. "It's okay," he lied, forcing a smile. "Just do your best. That's all that matters." He knew it wasn't okay. Her teacher would ask why she wasn't in uniform. Her friends might make fun of her. He was sending his daughter into a difficult day, and it was all his fault. After a quick silent breakfast, he grabbed his car keys. The drive to her school was tense. The usual Metro City traffic on the Harbor Way was even worse than normal. Horns blared from Danfo buses and private cars. Ethan gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. When they finally arrived at the school gate, Maya didn't even say goodbye. She just opened the door and ran towards her classroom, her head down. Ethan watched her go, his heart aching. He knew she was trying to avoid being seen by her friends. He let out a long, heavy sigh and was about to drive away when he saw his best friend Julian pull up beside him. Julian rolled down his window and his face was full of concern. "Are they my man?" Julian said, his voice serious. "We need to talk." Ethan knew this was not going to be a pleasant conversation. Julian followed Ethan back to his apartment. As soon as they stepped inside, Julian's eyes swept over the messy living room. He didn't say anything, but his silence was louder than words. Ethan felt a fresh wave of shame. He knew his home looked like a place where hope had given up. "Do you want some water?" Ethan asked, moving to clear a space on the sofa. Julian shook his head. He sat down in one of the clean armchairs, his expression grim. "I'm not here for water, Ethan. I came to see you because I'm worried." Ethan sat down on the sofa, feeling tired to his bones. "Worried about what?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "About you. About Maya?" Julian said, leaning forward. "I just dropped my son at school and I saw Maya running into her class. She wasn't in her uniform, man. She looked so sad." Ethan looked away, staring at a crack in the wall. "I know. I forgot to do the laundry." "It's not just the laundry, Ethan," Julian continued, his voice firm, but not unkind. "It's everything. When was the last time you had a proper meal? When was the last time you took Maya to the park? You look exhausted. You're working all the time, and when you're not working, you're just sitting here lost in your thoughts." Ethan felt a spark of anger. It was easy for Julian to judge. Julian had a wife who managed his home and took care of his children. Julian didn't know what it was like to be alone, to carry the weight of everything on his own shoulders. "You don't understand," Ethan said, his voice low. "Then make me understand," Julian insisted. "I'm your best friend. I've known you since we were boys in Green Valley. I know you're still hurting because Clara left. But you can't let that pain destroy you and your daughter's life. Maya needs you, Ethan. She needs her father." The anger in Ethan's chest faded, replaced by a deep, aching sadness. Julian was right. He was so caught up in his own grief that he was becoming a ghost in his own home. He was there, but he wasn't really present for Maya. "I'm trying, Julian," he whispered. "I really am, but I'm so tired. By the time I get home, I have no energy left. I fell asleep on the sofa last night. Maya had to wake me up this morning." Julian's expression softened. He saw the genuine pain in his friend's eyes. "I know you're trying, my brother, but you can't do this alone. It's too much for one person." Ethan ran his hands over his face. "What am I supposed to do? I can't quit my job." "No one is asking you to quit your job," Julian said gently. "But you need help. You need someone to manage the house, to cook the meals, to make sure Maya's uniforms are clean and ready for school." Ethan looked up confused. "Who?" "My mother is in the village, and she's too old." "I'm talking about a nanny, Ethan," Julian said. "A good, reliable housekeeper who can take care of things here so you can focus on your work and, more importantly, on being a father to Maya when you're home." Ethan shook his head immediately. "A stranger in my house? No, I don't want that. I don't trust anyone." The thought of another woman in the space that Clara had once occupied made him feel uncomfortable. "Not all women are like Clara," Julian said softly but firmly. "There are good people out there. My cousin runs an agency. She finds very good, trustworthy domestic staff. Let me talk to her. Let me find someone for you." Ethan was silent for a long time. He looked around his messy living room, at the stacks of unwashed plates, at the dust gathering on the shelves. He thought of Maya's sad face that morning. He knew he couldn't continue like this. Something had to change. Finally, he looked at Julian and nodded slowly. "Okay," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Okay, find someone." Julian smiled. A look of relief on his face. "I will, my brother. I promise we will fix this." A tiny part of Ethan felt a flicker of hope. Maybe Julian was right. Maybe help was what he needed. But another larger part of him was filled with doubt. Could a stranger really fix the broken pieces of his life? That evening, Ethan made a special effort. He left work a little earlier than usual and stopped at a small market in Oak District to buy fresh fish and vegetables. He was determined to cook a proper meal for Maya. He wanted to make up for the terrible morning. The aroma of fried fish and jollof rice soon filled the apartment, masking the smell of stale air. When Maya came home from her after-school lessons, she looked surprised to see the table set and dinner ready. "Wow, Daddy, you cooked," she said, a small smile touching her lips for the first time that day. "Of course, my love," Ethan said, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. "Sit down. Let's eat." But as they sat at the table, the smile on Maya's face slowly faded. She pushed the rice around her plate with her fork, but didn't take a single bite. "What's wrong? Don't you like it?" Ethan asked, his own appetite disappearing. Maya shook her head. "It's nice, Daddy." "Then why aren't you eating?" he pressed gently. Maya looked down at her plate, her lower lip trembling. A tear rolled down her cheek and splashed onto the table. "Honey, what is it?" Ethan asked, his voice full of worry. He reached across the table and took her small hand in his. "My friends at school laughed at me," she whispered, her voice choked with tears. "They said my dress was ugly. They asked why I wasn't wearing my uniform. I told them you forgot to wash it." Ethan's heart felt like a heavy stone in his chest. He had known this would happen. He had let her down. "I am so sorry, Maya. It was my fault. It won't happen again. I promise." But Maya's sadness was deeper than just the embarrassment at school. She looked up at him, her big brown eyes filled with a pain that seemed too large for her small face. "I miss Mommy," she said, and the words were like a punch to Ethan's gut. "When Mommy was here, my uniforms were always clean. She used to plait my hair every morning." Ethan felt helpless. He didn't know what to say. He missed Clara too, but his missing her was complicated. It was tangled with anger and betrayal. Clara had not just left him. She had abandoned them. She had chosen a different life, one that didn't include being a wife or a mother. He had tried to protect Maya from the truth, telling her that her mother had to travel for a very long job. "I know you do, my love," he said, his voice thick with emotion. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight as she cried against his chest. Her small body shook with sobs, and Ethan felt his own eyes grow wet. He rocked her gently, whispering promises that he wasn't sure he could keep. "It's going to be okay. I'll do better. I promise." That night, as he tucked Maya into bed, she was still quiet and withdrawn. She didn't ask for a bedtime story. She just turned to face the wall. Her small shoulders slumped in defeat. Ethan stood in the doorway of her room for a long time, watching her. The silence in the apartment was deafening. He realized that the house wasn't just messy. It was empty. It was missing the laughter and warmth that a family should have. He walked back into the living room and slumped onto the sofa. He picked up his phone and saw a message from Julian. "I found someone. Her name is Faith. She can come for an interview tomorrow. She has excellent references." Ethan stared at the message. A nanny. A stranger. He still wasn't sure it was the right thing to do. But as he thought of Maya's tears and her whispered words, "I miss Mommy," he knew he had no other choice. He couldn't fix the past. He couldn't bring Clara back. And even if he could, he wouldn't. But maybe, just maybe, he could start to build a better present for his daughter. He typed back a short reply to Julian. Tell her to come. He made a silent promise to his sleeping daughter. He would fix this for her. The next day, Ethan arranged to work from home in the afternoon so he could meet the nanny candidate. He was nervous. His heart was a tight knot of skepticism and hope. He wanted this to work for Maya's sake, but he was afraid of letting someone new into their broken little world. At exactly 2 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Ethan took a deep breath and opened the door. Standing there was a woman who looked to be in her late 20s. She was neatly dressed in a simple blouse and skirt, her hair pulled back in a tidy braid. She had a calm, kind face. "Good afternoon, sir," she said, her voice polite. "My name is Faith. I'm here for the interview." Ethan recognized her immediately. She was the woman he had seen outside Maya's school a few weeks ago, the one who had stayed with Maya when he was stuck in traffic and running late. She had been so patient and kind to his daughter. "Please come in," Ethan said, a little of his tension easing. He led her into the living room, which he had made an effort to tidy up that morning. They sat down, and Ethan tried to be professional. He asked her about her experience, her qualifications, and why she wanted the job. Faith answered each question calmly and confidently. She had worked for 2 other families in Metro City, and she had glowing letters of recommendation. Why did you leave your last job? Ethan asked, trying to find a flaw. The family relocated to the mainland, sir, she explained. They wanted me to come with them, but my own family is here in the city. Ethan nodded, impressed by her loyalty. He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw a quiet strength in her eyes. She didn't seem like someone who would run away when things got tough. This job is not easy, Ethan found himself saying, his voice more honest than he intended. My daughter's mother is not with us. It's just the 2 of us. The house is often a mess. I work long hours, Maya. She has been very sad lately. Faith listened without interrupting. Her gaze was full of empathy. I understand, sir, she said softly. Children need stability. They need routine, and they need to know they are loved. Her words struck a chord with Ethan. It was exactly what he had been failing to provide. He felt a sudden, surprising urge to trust her. This woman, this stranger, seemed to understand his family's pain without him needing to spell it out. You're hired, he said, the words coming out before he could second-guess them. Faith looked a little surprised by his quick decision, but she smiled. Thank you, sir. I promise I will do my best for you and your daughter. I have some rules, Ethan said, trying to regain his professional composure. You will be responsible for all the housekeeping, cooking, and laundry. You will help Maya with her homework. You are to be here from Monday to Saturday. Most importantly, your focus must be on Maya. Her well-being is the top priority. Of course, sir, Faith said, her smile never wavering. And one more thing, Ethan added, his voice firm. This is a professional arrangement. I expect you to maintain a professional distance. Mind your business and stick to your duties. He needed to set that boundary. He couldn't handle any more emotional complications in his life. Faith simply nodded. I understand completely, sir. There was a quiet confidence in her eyes that made Ethan feel like she saw right through the walls he was trying to build around his heart. She saw his pain, his fear, and his desperate hope that she could be the one to help fix his broken home. He told her she could start the next day. As he showed her out, he felt a strange mix of emotions. He was scared of the change, scared of letting a stranger into their lives. But for the first time in a long time, he also felt a glimmer of something he hadn't felt since Clara left. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, faith was the answer to his silent prayers. Faith arrived early the next morning, her face bright and ready for the day. Ethan was rushing around, trying to get himself and Maya ready. The apartment was already slipping back into its usual state of chaos. Good morning, sir. Good morning, Maya, Faith said with a warm smile. Maya, who was still feeling sad and withdrawn, just mumbled a quiet, "Good morning," and looked away. She clearly saw Faith as a stranger who was trying to take her mother's place. Faith didn't seem bothered by Maya's coldness. She simply put her bag down and looked around. Sir, why don't you focus on getting ready for work? I can make breakfast and get Maya's lunchbox packed. Ethan hesitated for a moment, not used to someone else taking charge, but he was running late, so he nodded gratefully. Thank you, Faith. He went to his room to finish getting dressed. From the kitchen, he could hear the quiet, efficient sounds of Faith at work. There was no loud clattering of pots and pans, just a calm, steady rhythm. When he came out a few minutes later, the smell of freshly made pancakes filled the air. Maya was sitting at the table, a plate of warm pancakes in front of her. She was still quiet, but she was eating, her eyes wide with surprise. This is good, she said softly when she saw her father. Faith smiled. I'm glad you like it, Maya. I packed some for your lunch, too. Ethan was amazed. In less than 30 minutes, Faith had brought a sense of order and peace to their chaotic morning. He felt a weight lift from his shoulders. I have to go, he said, picking up his briefcase. Faith, Maya's school bus comes at 8. Please make sure she is ready. Yes, sir, Faith replied. Have a good day at work. As Ethan drove to his office, he couldn't stop thinking about the scene he had left behind. For the first time in months, he wasn't worried about Maya being late or going to school hungry. He felt a sense of relief so profound it almost made him emotional. That evening, when he returned home, he was greeted by a sight that nearly brought tears to his eyes. The living room was spotless. The stray papers were neatly stacked. The old plates were gone, and the floor was shining. The entire apartment felt lighter, brighter. And then he heard it. Laughter. It was Maya's laughter, clear and joyful. He followed the sound to the living room and saw Maya and Faith sitting on the floor playing a board game. Maya's face was lit up with a happiness he hadn't seen in a very long time. Daddy, you're home? She cried, jumping up to hug him. Faith and I were playing Ludo. I'm winning. Ethan hugged her back, his heart full. He looked at Faith, who was smiling at them. Welcome back, sir, she said. Dinner is almost ready. The contrast between this evening and the countless sad, silent evenings before was overwhelming. Faith had been in their home for less than a day, but she had already worked a miracle. She had brought back the light that had been missing for so long. Later, as they ate dinner together, Ethan watched Faith and Maya interact. Faith was patient and kind, listening to Maya's stories about her day at school. She wasn't trying to be a mother. She was just being a caring, attentive friend, and Maya was responding to it. She was opening up, her sadness slowly melting away. That night, for the first time in over a year, Ethan went to bed feeling a sense of peace. He knew that hiring Faith was the best decision he had ever made. The house was no longer just a building. It was starting to feel like a home again. And as he drifted off to sleep, the sound of his daughter's laughter echoed in his mind. The days that followed settled into a new, comfortable routine. Faith was a quiet force of nature in the house. She cleaned, she cooked, and she managed everything with an efficiency that Ethan found both impressive and a little intimidating. But it was her relationship with Maya that truly touched his heart. Faith understood that Maya was still grieving for her mother, so she never tried to take Clara's place. Instead, she became a steady, gentle presence in Maya's life. She braided Maya's hair in the morning, making intricate styles that Maya loved. She packed her lunch with little notes that said things like, "Have a wonderful day," or, "You're a star." One afternoon, Ethan came home to find Maya sitting at the dining table. A frustrated frown on her face. Her math homework was spread out in front of her. "I don't get it," Maya grumbled, pushing the book away. "It's too hard." Ethan was about to try and help, but he was never very good at math. Before he could say anything, Faith came and sat down next to Maya. "Let's look at it together," Faith said in her calm, patient voice. She picked up a pencil and started to explain the problem in a way that was simple and easy to understand. She drew little pictures to illustrate the numbers, turning the difficult assignment into a fun game. Ethan watched from the doorway, amazed. In a matter of minutes, Maya's frown had turned into a look of concentration and then into a bright smile of understanding. "I get it now," Maya exclaimed. "It's easy. See, I told you were a star," Faith said, ruffling her hair. She then went to the kitchen and came back with 2 small bowls of ice cream. A reward for a very smart girl. Maya's eyes lit up. She and Faith sat together eating their ice cream and chatting like old friends. Ethan felt a warmth spread through him. Faith wasn't just doing her job. She was genuinely caring for his daughter. She was healing the small, sad parts of Maya's heart with her quiet kindness. Later that evening, as Maya was getting ready for bed, she did something that surprised everyone. She ran to Faith and gave her a tight hug. "Thank you for helping me, Faith," she whispered. Faith looked taken back for a moment, and then her face softened into a beautiful smile. She hugged Maya back gently. "You're welcome, my dear. Anytime." The gesture was small, but to Ethan, it felt monumental. It was a sign that Maya was starting to heal, starting to trust again, and it was all because of Faith. After Maya was in bed, Ethan found Faith in the living room quietly folding laundry. "Thank you," he said, his voice full of gratitude, "for everything you're doing for Maya." Faith looked up, her expression humble. "I'm just doing my job, sir." "No, it's more than that," Ethan insisted. "You're very good with her. She hasn't been this happy in a long time." Faith smiled, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. "She's a wonderful girl. It's easy to care for her." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. The house was quiet and peaceful. Ethan realized that he was starting to feel more relaxed, too. The constant knot of worry in his stomach was beginning to loosen. He was sleeping better, eating better, and he was able to focus more at work. Knowing that things at home were in good hands, he was grateful to Faith, more grateful than he could put into words. She had brought not just order to their house, but also a glimmer of light and hope. As he watched her fold his daughter's clothes with such care, he felt a strange, unfamiliar warmth in his chest. It was a feeling he hadn't allowed himself to feel for a very long time. As weeks turned into a month, the transformation in Ethan's home became even more apparent. The apartment was no longer just a clean space. It was filled with life. Faith had a green thumb, and she had placed small potted plants on the windowsills, bringing touches of nature indoors. The smell of baking bread or simmering stew often welcomed Ethan when he came home from a long day at his architectural firm. More importantly, Maya was blossoming. She was no longer the quiet, sad little girl who ran from her friends. She was bright and cheerful, her laughter echoing through the halls. She and Faith had become inseparable. They would do homework together, play games, and sometimes Ethan would come home to find them in the kitchen baking cookies and making a happy mess. Ethan found himself looking forward to coming home. The heavy feeling that used to greet him at the door was gone, replaced by sense of peace and anticipation. He started leaving work on time, eager to spend the evenings with his daughter, and he admitted to himself. With Faith, he enjoyed their simple family dinners. They would talk about their day and Ethan would listen as Maya and Faith shared jokes and stories. He found himself laughing more, his own stress and sadness slowly fading into the background. One rainy Metro City afternoon, Ethan managed to finish his work early. The sky was gray and a steady downpour was turning the streets into rivers. He decided to surprise Maya by picking her up from school himself. When he walked into the apartment, he was met with a scene that made him stop in his tracks. The living room was cozy and warm, a stark contrast to the storm outside. Maya and Faith were curled up on the sofa, a blanket spread over their laps. Faith was reading a storybook aloud, her voice soft and expressive. Maya was listening with wide, captivated eyes, her head resting against Faith's shoulder. They didn't notice him standing there. The moment was so private, so full of peace and contentment that Ethan felt like an intruder. He watched them for a few seconds, a powerful wave of emotion washing over him. This was what a family felt like. This was the warmth he had been missing for so long. He felt a genuine smile spread across his face, a smile that reached his eyes. It wasn't forced or polite. It was real. Just then, Faith looked up and saw him. Her own face broke into a surprised, welcoming smile. "Daddy!" Maya cried, scrambling off the sofa to hug him. "I came to pick you up, but it seems you were having a good time," Ethan said, hugging her tightly. "Faith was reading me a story about a brave princess," Maya said excitedly. Ethan looked at Faith over Maya's head. Their eyes met, and in that moment, a silent, unspoken understanding passed between them. He was grateful for her, and she knew it. She saw the change in him, the slow return of the happy, relaxed man he used to be. "Welcome home, sir," Faith said, her voice soft. "Please, Faith," Ethan said, surprising himself. "Call me Ethan." A small blush appeared on her cheeks, but she nodded. "Okay, Ethan." That evening felt different. The professional barrier between them seemed to have softened. They talked more freely, sharing their own stories and experiences. Ethan learned that Faith had grown up in a small town near Green Valley and had always dreamed of living in a big city like Metro City. She told him about her love for books and her passion for cooking. Ethan found himself drawn to her quiet strength, her kindness, and her gentle sense of humor. He was starting to see her not just as a nanny, but as a woman, a beautiful, intelligent, and compassionate woman. As he lay in bed that night, listening to the rain drumming against the window, he realized something that both scared and excited him. He was starting to have feelings for Faith. It was a dangerous thought, one that went against all the rules he had set for himself. But as he thought of her warm smile, and the way she had brought so much light back into his and Maya's lives, he couldn't deny the truth. The glimmer of hope she had brought into his home was starting to feel a lot like love. Life in Ethan's apartment had found a happy, peaceful rhythm. The mornings were no longer a frantic rush, but a calm routine orchestrated by Faith. The evenings were filled with the sound of Maya's chatter, the smell of delicious food, and a growing comfortable warmth between Ethan and Faith. He hadn't felt this content in years. He was finally starting to believe that he and Maya could truly be happy again. One Friday evening, Ethan was sitting on the sofa reviewing some architectural plans. Faith was in the kitchen, humming softly as she prepared dinner. Maya was in her room finishing up her homework. It was a perfect ordinary evening. Then the phone rang. Ethan picked it up without looking at the caller ID. Hello? There was a pause on the other end, and then a voice he hadn't heard in over a year spoke his name. Ethan, it's me. His blood ran cold. It was Clara. His entire body tensed up. He hadn't spoken to his ex-wife since the day she walked out on them. She had sent a few text messages in the beginning, full of vague excuses, but then she had disappeared completely. Clara, he said, his voice tight. What do you want? Is that any way to greet your wife? She asked, her voice light and casual, as if they had just spoken yesterday. You are not my wife, Ethan said sharply. Not anymore. He could almost hear her shrug on the other end of the line. Details? Anyway, I have wonderful news. I'm back in Metro City. Ethan felt a surge of panic. Back in Metro City? Why, after all this time? Why now? And I want to see Maya. Clara continued, her voice taking on a demanding tone. She is my daughter after all. I'll come by the house tomorrow. No, Ethan said immediately. You can't just show up here whenever you feel like it. You lost that right when you left. Clara laughed, a sound that grated on Ethan's nerves. Don't be so dramatic, Ethan. I'm her mother. I have every right to see her. I'll be there around noon. Make sure she's ready. Before Ethan could argue further, she hung her up. He stood in the middle of the living room, the phone still pressed to his ear, his hand shaking. The peace and contentment he had been feeling just moments before had shattered into a million pieces. All the old feelings of anger, betrayal, and hurt came rushing back, suffocating him. Clara was back. The ghost of his past had returned to haunt him. He didn't know what to do. How could he let her see Maya? After a year of silence, she couldn't just waltz back into their lives and pretend nothing had happened. He knew her presence would only confuse and hurt his daughter. Just then, Faith walked out of the kitchen, a tray of drinks in her hands. She saw the look on his face and her smile faltered. Ethan? She asked, her voice full of concern. Is everything okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. Ethan looked at her, his heart pounding in his chest. He didn't know how to explain what had just happened. He didn't want to bring the darkness of his past into the new fragile world of light they had started to build. But looking into Faith's kind, worried eyes, he knew he couldn't hide it from her. The storm was coming, and he was afraid he couldn't face it alone. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. The peaceful rhythm of his new life had just been broken, and he had no idea how to fix it. Ethan stared at Faith, his mind racing. The professional boundary he had tried so hard to maintain suddenly felt foolish and unnecessary. He needed to talk to someone, and the calm, steady presence of Faith felt like the only safe harbor in his sudden storm. It was my ex-wife, he said, his voice barely a whisper. Her name is Clara. She's back in Metro City. She wants to see Maya. Faith put the tray down on the coffee table. She didn't say anything, but her eyes were full of a deep, quiet empathy. She simply waited for him to continue. Encouraged by her silent support, Ethan found himself opening up in a way he never had before. He told her about his marriage to Clara, about how happy they had been in the beginning. He told her how things had slowly started to fall apart, how Clara had become distant and unhappy, always searching for something more, something different. She was always talking about a bigger life, Ethan explained, the words tumbling out of him. She felt trapped here. She said being a wife and a mother wasn't enough for her. And then one day I came home from work, and she was just gone. She left a note, said she needed to find herself. He hadn't spoken about this to anyone, not even Julian. The shame and pain were too deep, but with Faith, it felt different. She listened with such genuine compassion that he felt safe enough to be vulnerable. She abandoned us, Faith, he said, the old hurt fresh in his voice. She abandoned her own daughter. For a whole year, there was nothing. No calls, no messages. And now she just calls and expects to walk back into our lives like nothing happened. He finally looked at Faith, expecting to see judgment, pity in her eyes. Instead, he saw only understanding. I'm so sorry, Ethan, she said softly. That must have been incredibly difficult for you and for Maya. There was no judgment, no criticism, just simple heartfelt empathy. It was exactly what he needed to hear. I don't know what to do, he confessed. I don't want Maya to get hurt again. Clara's return will only confuse her. Faith was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. Maya is a smart and resilient girl, she said. But she is also sensitive. You're right to want to protect her. She paused, then added, but you don't have to face this alone. You and Maya are a team, and I'm here to help in any way I can. Her words were a lifeline. The burden on his shoulders suddenly felt a little lighter, as if she had taken a piece of it for herself. The thought of facing Clara with Faith by his side gave him a strength he didn't know he had. Thank you, Faith, he said, his voice thick with emotion. That means more than you know. They sat in silence for a while, a new, deeper connection forming between them. It was no longer just an employer and his nanny. It was two people sharing a moment of vulnerability. Two souls connecting in a quiet, unexpected way. Later that night, as Ethan lay in bed, he thought about his conversation with Faith. He was still scared of Clara's return, but he no longer felt completely alone. Faith's quiet strength and unwavering support had given him courage. He realized that she had become more than just a nanny. She was a friend, a confidant, a partner in the challenging task of raising his daughter. He knew the days ahead would be difficult. Clara's return was bound to bring chaos and pain. But for the first time since the phone call, he felt a flicker of confidence. He looked at the closed door of his room and thought of Faith sleeping in the guest room down the hall. You and Maya are strong, she had told him. You will get through this. He held on to her words like a prayer. Maybe with her help, they actually could. The next day, a heavy sense of dread hung over the apartment. Ethan had told Maya that a visitor was coming, but he didn't have the heart to tell her it was her mother. He just wanted to protect her for as long as he could. Faith moved about the house with her usual quiet efficiency, but Ethan could see the concern in her eyes. She made sure Maya was occupied with a new puzzle, trying to keep her distracted. At precisely noon, the doorbell rang. Ethan's heart hammered against his ribs. He took a deep breath and walked to the door. Faith standing a few steps behind him, a silent pillar of support. He opened the door, and there was Clara. She looked different from the woman he remembered. She was dressed in a stylish, expensive-looking dress, her hair perfectly styled. She looked glamorous and worldly like a character from a movie. There was no trace of the unhappy, restless wife who had left him. Ethan, darling, she said, smiling as if they were the best of friends. She swept past him into the living room without an invitation. The place looks clean. You must have hired some help. Her eyes landed on Faith, and her smile tightened. She looked Faith up and down with a dismissive air. You must be the nanny, she said, her tone dripping with condescension. Before Faith could respond, Clara's attention shifted. Maya, my baby. Where are you? Maya, hearing her mother's voice, came running out of her room. She stopped short when she saw Clara. Her face a mixture of shock, confusion, and a flicker of hope. Mommy, she whispered. Clara knelt and opened her arms wide. Come to Mommy, my sweet girl. Maya hesitated for a moment, glancing back at Faith, then at her father. Then she slowly walked into her mother's arms. Clara hugged her tightly, showering her with kisses. I've missed you so much, Clara said, her voice suddenly full of emotion, but Ethan could see that it was an act. Her eyes were cold, calculating. She stood up, still holding Maya's hand, and looked around the room. She noticed the new potted plants, the neat stacks of books, the overall sense of order. It seems you've made yourself quite at home, she said to Faith, her words sharp. The atmosphere in the room grew thick with tension. Maya, sensing the conflict, shrank back, her earlier excitement gone. She moved to stand closer to Faith. Clara's eyes narrowed. She clearly did not like that her daughter was seeking comfort from the nanny. She tried to pull Maya back to her side, but Maya resisted, holding on to Faith's hand. Ethan knew he had to step in. Clara, maybe we should talk, he said, trying to keep his voice even. Yes, we should. Clara agreed, her gaze fixed on Faith. But first, I think the help should go to the kitchen and make us some tea. Maya, come with me, darling. Let's sit down and talk. She tried to lead Maya to the sofa, but Maya looked to Faith for permission. The simple innocent action was a clear sign of where Maya's trust and affection now lay. It was a silent declaration that Faith was the one who made her feel safe. Clara saw it, and a flicker of anger crossed her face. She dropped Maya's hand and turned to Ethan, her glamorous facade cracking. We have a lot to sort out, Ethan, she said, her voice low and dangerous. Send her away. We need to talk alone. Ethan looked from Clara's angry face to Faith's calm one and then to his daughter, who was looking up at him with scared, confused eyes. He knew this was just the beginning of the storm. Ethan asked Faith to take Maya to her room. He needed to face Clara alone without his daughter caught in the crossfire. As soon as they were gone, Clara's entire demeanor changed. The cold anger was replaced by a soft, regretful expression. It was an act Ethan knew all too well. Ethan, I know you're angry, she began, her voice smooth and persuasive. And you have every right to be. I made a terrible mistake. I was lost and I needed to find myself, but I'm back now and I've changed. She walked closer to him, placing a hand on his arm. I missed you. I miss this. I miss being a family. Ethan stood stiffly, refusing to be drawn in by her performance. He remembered the countless times she had used this same soft voice to get what she wanted, only to leave him feeling empty and used. What do you want, Clara? He asked, his voice flat. I want us back, she said, her eyes pleading. I want to be a mother to Maya again. I want to be your wife. We can be a family, a proper family, just like we were meant to be. A part of Ethan, a small, foolish part that still remembered the good times, felt a flicker of something. The dream of a complete family, the one he had held on to for so long after she left, was a powerful one. But then he thought of the past year. He remembered the lonely nights, the chaotic mornings, Maya's tears, and he thought of Faith, of the peace and warmth she had brought into their lives. It's not that simple, Clara, he said, pulling his arm away. You were gone for a year. You can't just come back and expect everything to be the same. But it can be, she insisted. It can be even better. I've grown up. Ethan, I know what's important now. It's you and Maya. It has always been you and Maya. He could see the calculation in her eyes. She was saying all the right words, but he didn't believe her. He didn't trust her. What about her? Clara asked, gesturing towards the hallway where Faith had disappeared. The nanny. How long has she been here? A few months? Ethan answered, feeling defensive. Clara scoffed. Well, she'll have to go, of course. We can't have a stranger living in our house if we're going to be a family again. Her words hit him like a cold slap. Get rid of Faith. The thought was unbearable. Faith was the one who had held their lives together. She was the one who had brought laughter back into his home. She was the one who had healed his daughter's heart. She's not just a help, Clara, Ethan said, his voice firm. She has been wonderful to Maya. I'm sure she has, Clara said dismissively. But Maya has her real mother back now. She doesn't need a paid stranger to take care of her. Ethan looked at her, and for the first time he saw her clearly without any lingering affection from their past. He saw a selfish woman who thought only of herself. She hadn't come back for him or for Maya. She had come back for herself to reclaim a life she had thrown away without any thought for the damage she had caused. He was torn. The idea of his original family being whole again was tempting. It was the dream he had once cried himself to sleep over. But was it real? Could he ever trust Clara again? And what about Faith? Could he really just send her away after everything she had done for them? Clara saw the conflict on his face and pressed her advantage. Just think about it, Ethan, she said, her voice a soft whisper. You, me, and Maya, together again. Just get rid of the nanny, and we can start over. He felt trapped. It was a choice between a beautiful, broken dream from his past and a fragile, hopeful reality in his present. And he didn't know which one to choose. Ethan felt like he was suffocating. Clara's words echoed in his mind. Get rid of the nanny. He walked through his quiet, clean house, a space that Faith had transformed from a shell into a home. The thought of her leaving, of the silence and sadness returning, was a physical pain in his chest. He needed to think. He went to Maya's room, needing to see his daughter, the center of his world. He pushed the door open quietly and found her sitting on her bed, her small shoulders shaking. She was crying. His heart dropped. Maya, what's wrong? He asked, rushing to her side. She looked up at him, her face streaked with tears. Is Faith leaving? She asked, her voice trembling. The question caught Ethan completely off guard. Why would you think that, honey? Because Mommy is back, Maya whispered. Is Faith going to go away now? I don't want her to go. I like Faith. She helps me with my homework and she tells me stories and she makes you smile, Daddy. Her words, so simple and honest, were like a key unlocking something deep inside him. He had been so focused on his own conflicted feelings on the ghost of his past with Clara that he hadn't fully considered what Maya wanted, what she needed. He had thought that bringing Clara back would fix their family, would give Maya the mother she missed. But Maya wasn't missing the glamorous, selfish woman who had just walked back into their lives. She was missing the idea of a mother, someone kind, patient, and loving. And she had found all of that in Faith. In that moment, everything became clear. A true family wasn't about biology or a marriage certificate. It was about love, stability, and being there for each other day after day. Clara had broken that trust. Faith had built it. Ethan looked at his daughter's tearful face and saw the truth. His home was not with Clara. His and Maya's future was not in the past. It was here in this peaceful, happy house with the woman who had so gently and lovingly put the pieces of their lives back together. He pulled Maya into a tight hug, a fierce wave of love and protection washing over him. He had his answer. No, my love, he said, his voice strong and certain. Faith is not leaving. I won't let her. Maya looked up at him, a glimmer of hope in her wet eyes. Really, Daddy? You promise? I promise, he said, stroking her hair. Don't you worry about anything. I will make everything right. A sense of calm settled over him. The conflict was gone. He knew what he had to do. It wouldn't be easy, but it was the right thing to do for Maya and for himself. He left Maya in her room, promising to come back and read her a story. He walked back into the living room, ready to face Clara, ready to finally close the door on his past. But when he entered the room, it was empty. Clara was gone. On the coffee table was a note written on a piece of expensive stationery. It read, "I'll be back tomorrow for your answer. Don't make the wrong choice." Ethan crumpled the note in his fist. He had already made his choice. His family was here in this house, and Faith was a part of it. Now he just had to find the courage to tell her. Ethan knew he couldn't wait. The thought of Faith believing she had to leave was a panic that tightened his chest. He needed to talk to her, to tell her everything before his fear made him lose his nerve. He walked down the hall to the guest room and found the door slightly ajar. He pushed it open and his heart sank. Faith was there, and she was packing a small suitcase. She was folding her clothes neatly, her movements precise but sad. "Faith," he said, his voice catching in his throat. "What are you doing?" She looked up, startled. There were unshed tears in her eyes, but her expression was composed. "I'm packing, Sir Ethan," she corrected herself. "I think it's best if I leave now that Maya's mother is back. You don't need me anymore." "No," Ethan said, stepping into the room. "That's not true. We do need you. I need you." He walked over to her and gently took her hand, stopping her from packing. "Please don't go." Faith looked at him confused. "But your ex-wife?" "She is my ex-wife for a reason," Ethan said firmly. "She is Maya's biological mother, but she is not the mother Maya needs. You are. You're the one who has been here. You're the one who brought the light back into our lives." He took a deep breath, his heart pounding. It was now or never. "Faith, I know I set a lot of rules when you first came. I told you to keep a professional distance, but I can't do that anymore. I've tried to fight it, but I have feelings for you. Strong feelings." He looked into her beautiful, surprised eyes. "I don't want you to be our nanny anymore. I want you to be a part of our family. I want you to stay with me, with us." Faith stared at him. Her lips slightly parted in shock. The tears she had been holding back finally spilled over and ran down her cheeks. But these were not tears of sadness. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I have feelings for you, too. From the very first day I saw you, I felt a connection, but I never thought. I didn't want to overstep." A joyful relief washed over Ethan. He reached up and gently wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "There are no boundaries to overstep anymore," he said softly. He was about to lean in and kiss her to seal this incredible new beginning, when a sharp voice cut through the tender moment. "What exactly is going on here?" They both turned, startled. Clara was standing in the doorway, her arms crossed, her face a mask of fury. She had come back, and she had clearly heard everything. "So, this is your choice, Ethan?" Clara sneered, her eyes flashing with anger. "You're choosing the help over your own wife, over your family." Ethan instinctively stepped in front of Faith, shielding her. He was no longer afraid of Clara. He was no longer trapped by their past. "You are not my wife, Clara," he said, his voice calm and steady. "And our family is right here." The battle for his future had just begun, but Ethan knew with a certainty that filled his entire being which side he was on. Clara's face twisted with rage. "How dare you!" she hissed, stepping into the room. "After everything we've been through, you're throwing it all away for a housekeeper." She pointed a finger at Faith. "You came into my home and you stole my family." Faith flinched, but Ethan stood firm, his hand finding hers behind his back. A silent gesture of support. "No one stole anything, Clara," Ethan said, his voice low, but powerful. "You gave it away. You walked out on us. You left your daughter without a word for a year. That was your choice." "I made a mistake," Clara cried, her anger turning to desperate tears. "I came back. I came back for you, for Maya. And this is how you treat me." "You didn't come back for us," Ethan said, the truth clear in his mind. "You came back for yourself. You think you can just press a button and rewind our lives to a time that was convenient for you. But life doesn't work that way. We've moved on. Moved on? Clara scoffed, looking at Faith with disgust. With her? Just then, Maya appeared in the doorway, drawn by the loud voices. She looked scared, her eyes darting between her parents and Faith. Seeing her daughter, Clara's strategy shifted. She softened her voice and knelt, opening her arms to Maya. Maya, my sweet girl, come to mommy. This woman is trying to take your place. Don't you want your real mommy back? Maya hesitated, her small face filled with confusion and fear. She looked at Clara, then at Faith, who was standing quietly, her heart breaking for the little girl caught in the middle. Ethan knelt beside Maya, putting a comforting arm around her. Maya, he said gently, you have a choice. Who do you want to be a part of our family? It was a difficult question to ask a child, but Ethan knew it was the only one that mattered. Maya looked at Clara, the glamorous stranger who had reappeared in her life. Then she looked at Faith, the woman who braided her hair, helped her with homework, and read her bedtime stories every night. Slowly, deliberately, Maya walked over to Faith and took her hand, holding on tight. The action was simple, but it was a final, undeniable answer. Clara stared at them, her face crumbling in defeat. She had used her last weapon, and it had failed. She had lost. She had truly lost her daughter. A heavy silence filled the room. Clara stood up, her glamorous facade completely gone. She looked old and tired. Fine, she whispered, her voice empty. Fine. Without another word, she turned and walked out of the room and out of their lives. The front door clicked shut, and the sound echoed in the quiet apartment. The storm had passed. Ethan, Faith, and Maya stood together in the middle of the room. They were not a traditional family, but in that moment they were a unit bound together by love, choice, and the shared experience of standing together against the past. Ethan looked at Faith, his heart full of a love so strong it almost hurt. He looked at his daughter, who was still holding Faith's hand. They were a new, uncertain family, but they were together. He reached out and took Faith's other hand. The three of them stood in a small circle, a quiet promise passing between them. They had a long way to go, but they would face it together. After Clara left, a strange quiet settled over the apartment. It wasn't the heavy, sad silence Ethan was used to, but a new, thoughtful quiet. They were a family of three now, but the lines were blurry. Faith was no longer just a nanny, but she wasn't quite a mother yet either. Ethan was no longer just her employer, but they hadn't had a chance to figure out what they were to each other. That evening, Faith cooked dinner as usual, but the atmosphere was different. There was an awareness between her and Ethan, a gentle awkwardness that was both sweet and nerve-wracking. They sat down at the dining table, just the three of them. Maya, feeling the shift in the air, was the first to speak. So, are you my new mommy now? She asked Faith, her voice a mix of hope and confusion. Faith looked at Ethan, a blush rising on her cheeks. Ethan smiled and reached for her hand across the table. Faith is going to be a very special part of our family, honey. Ethan explained gently. But these things take time. For now, how about you call her Auntie Faith? Maya thought about it for a moment, then nodded, a bright smile spreading across her face. Okay, Auntie Faith. The name sounded right. It was a bridge between what Faith had been and what she was becoming to them. The rest of the dinner was filled with easy conversation. They talked about school, about Ethan's work, and about Faith's favorite books. It felt natural. It felt right. The house, which had once been a place of sadness and chaos, was now filled with a quiet, steady warmth. Later, after Maya was tucked into bed, Ethan and Faith found themselves alone in the living room. The professional distance was gone, replaced by a shy new intimacy. Thank you for staying, Ethan said, his voice soft. Thank you for asking me, Faith replied, her eyes shining. He moved closer to her on the sofa. I meant what I said, Faith. I love you. I love you too, Ethan, she whispered. He leaned in, and this time there was no one to interrupt them. He gently cupped her face in his hands and gave her their first real kiss. It wasn't a passionate movie-style kiss. It was slow, tender, and full of all the unspoken emotions of the past few months. It was a kiss of gratitude, of relief, and of a hopeful new beginning. When they pulled apart, they were both smiling. The future was still uncertain. They had a lot to figure out. They had to learn how to be a couple, how to build a new family on the foundation of a broken one. But as they sat there holding hands in the quiet living room, they knew they could face it all as long as they were together. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges and adjustments. But for the first time in a very long time, Ethan's heart was full of hope. He looked at the amazing woman beside him, the one who had brought grace and light back into his life, and he knew that his home was finally whole again. Not because his old family was restored, but because he had been brave enough to build a new one. 6 months later, the apartment in Skyview was a different world. It was a home in every sense of the word, buzzing with happiness and the comfortable rhythm of family life. The walls were decorated with Maya's colorful drawings, and the air was always filled with the sounds of laughter and music. Today was a special day. It was Faith's birthday. Ethan had spent the morning preparing a surprise. He, Maya, and Julian, who had become a frequent and cheerful visitor, had decorated the living room with balloons and streamers. When Faith walked out of her room that afternoon, she was greeted with a loud chorus of happy birthday. Her face lit up with a joy so pure it made Ethan's heart ache in the best possible way. She looked beautiful in a simple blue dress he had bought for her. He walked over to her and gave her a loving kiss. "Happy birthday, my love," he whispered. Julian came forward, grinning from ear to ear. "Happy birthday, Faith. Thank you for saving my friend from himself." Everyone laughed. Julian had been their biggest supporter, and he was overjoyed to see his friend so happy. But the most special moment came from Maya. She ran to Faith holding a large handmade card. On the front, she had drawn a picture of the three of them holding hands with a bright smiling sun above them. Faith opened the card. Inside, written in Maya's neatest handwriting, were the words to Auntie Faith, the best mom in the whole world. "I love you from Maya." Faith's eyes filled with tears of joy. She knelt and pulled Maya into a fierce, loving hug. "Oh, Maya," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I love you too." Ethan watched them, his heart so full it felt like it might burst. He had come so far from the broken, exhausted man he had been. He had a loving partner, a happy daughter, and a home filled with peace. He walked over and wrapped his arms around both of them, completing their family circle. They stood there for a long moment, a perfect picture of a family made not by blood or by chance, but by love and by choice. Later that evening, after the small party was over and Maya was asleep, Ethan and Faith sat on the sofa holding hands. "This was the best birthday I've ever had," Faith said, her head resting on his shoulder. "It's just the first of many," Ethan promised, kissing the top of her head. He looked around his home at the colorful balloons and the remnants of the celebration. He thought about the journey they had been on, the pain, the healing, the fear, and the love. It hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. He looked at Faith, the woman who had walked into his life and taught him how to hope again. She was more than just a nanny. She was his partner, his best friend, his grace. Together they had built something beautiful and strong. The future stretched out before them, bright and full of promise. There would be more birthdays, more school tests, more challenges, and more joys. But they would face it all together as a family. The house was no longer empty. It was full of love, and that was all that mattered.